First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. Can I say how excited I am for to show off what Utah does best, our collaboration and that type of thing. And I want to thank everyone here. I'll say something in the next few minutes, but the stakeholders that are sitting at this table have been so instrumental in what we're doing in DC. And again, I'll say the thing that I always talk about with Utah. What I'm so proud of what we do is how well we collaborate. We have the same end game, which is actually to leave a great legacy, to make sure our kids are the smartest, the most productive, most hopeful, so we can go out and share what we do here so well. I want to, with what we just have experienced the last couple of days, add to that why I'm so impressed and thankful for the folks that are sitting at this table. Um, what we're recognizing is that what we do is truly at the front edge of our country's freedom, our culture, our ability to educate our kids, our ability to let them go out and have a good career, build their families, dream big, and a place of safety. That is all part of what keeps our culture the one that we can continue to pass down. So I want to say thank you guys because this is a mission. I was blessed to have a dad, and I was just thinking about this the other night. I've always talked about his passion for education, how they leaned in hard to make sure that we as his kids were exposed as much as possible. And I now realize it's really just a linkage to service. It's the idea that we have something of value that we want to serve and give to others, whether it be our understanding of life, our wisdom, whatever it is. And that is something that we have to hold on to this nation. We have to lead with that. We can do everything right. We can make sure that we're sealing the border, we're safe and all that. But if we don't teach our kids how to take what we understand here and what each one of us in our own way have kind of found a mission, and that's what it is. Every one of us, everyone sitting at this table have become experts because they have a desire to want to make sure that they can give what they have understood and their beliefs to others to be passed on. So I cannot say thank you enough for that. I really do appreciate you guys. We're about to make a major change. We're very fortunate to be part of a remarkable window of time, my friends, that we've seen our country almost come to the edge. We saw the darkness that's out there just recently, but we're going to bring ourselves back. We're going to have a generation of kids that are more hopeful than we are because they will see what our country is all about and what it's based on. So I just want to say that to start off. Thank you, guys. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to work with you. And I'm gonna introduce in a minute our chair. I'm going to say some nice things about Tim. I have so much respect for what he's doing and what he's done. But let me just, before I do that, just say a few things about the Working Families Tax Cut. This act we just passed recently is a true miracle. It is finally we're recognizing the folks who made our country what it is. It's our working class, middle class. It's those who go out every single day and they dream big, and all they want is just an opportunity to not only work hard but hold on to what they have. There's a few things that come out of this bill. I'm just going to highlight a few things. Also, particularly what Utahns can expect from it. But this is the largest tax cut in the history of our country. Over the next 10 years, $5 trillion. It's an average of 15% tax cuts for Americans between 15,000 and 80,000. Whoops, I need to turn that off. Sorry, guys. I'm going to start all over, sorry. No, I won't do that to you. But here's what this means for Utahns. And this is before getting into education. That's a whole different niche that we'll talk about the next hour or so. Utahns now can expect 11,400 increase in take-home pay. Utahns 69,000 small businesses will benefit from permanent tax cut. Just imagine being able to predict now where things are going and how to work through that. There's over 400,000 seniors who will have no tax on their Social Security. And there's also no tax on tips, which we'll be talking about here in the next few minutes. One of the things that is part of my district, and I love so much, my dad was an agronomist, is our rural area. That's truly where people roll up their sleeves, and that's where our country our culture is built. So they will have the ability to permanent increase in tax, death tax exemptions to hold on to those small farms. And there's something that with all the kids that we have a tendency of raising here, this is kind of cool. investment accounts for newborns. I don't know how many of you have heard about this or understand or know the details, but the government will seed every new child $1,000 for a seed account. And then parents can add up to $5,000. Parents or relatives can add up to $5,000 per year to that account. By the time that child is 18 years old, has grown up to 18 years old, there's over $300,000 in savings for account for that person. By the time he gets 32, that's $1.9 million in savings. Imagine the idea that we're now going to start teaching fiscal responsibility, education, because we have something we can hold on to and add on to everything else that's out there. Regarding the working family tax cut, the education here, we're going to be talking about higher education reform, the idea of meeting outcome matrix, workforce Pell, something that I'm so excited about, and I think here in Utah we've taken for granted choice. We know what that is. We think about it every single year. We get our kids ready for it. Well, we're going to start allowing the rest of the country to experience that. We'll talk about that a little bit. We were talking about no tax on tips. Of course, no tax on overtime, and what that means to the middle class. And we're going to wrap up with something that my team has been really focused on. And I'm excited about leaning in hard, and that is innovation in terms of the education to workforce, something called LERs. And we've kind of talked about that a little bit. I have some friends here that have been a really big piece of that. You can start to see a little presentation. I'll go very simply, is in the public-private partnership is to help people become aware. That's kind of what we see. With the private sector will bring the innovation. They'll be doing the collaboration to make sure it all works. But our goal is to make sure that it's not only legislative-wise, it's incentives to make it work, but as a team to make sure the rest of the country understands how powerful that's going to be for us. So we'll get into that also. I tell you, I'm one of those guys who have always believed, particularly as I get older, the Heavenly Father is a perfect plan. And my goal was to be chairman of this committee. The perfect plan is that I'm not. We have a person here, we have Tim, 16 years. He's been on this committee, 16 years. He's understood the nuance of what it takes to be a leader in this space. And there couldn't be a better time to have somebody experienced, wise, his background, very spiritual background, so he has a love for our kids. We just spent some time in Michigan with the Secretary McMahon at, Hillsdale, and also had a chance to also experience a heritage school. Things like that Tim is very, very aware of. And I'm just excited that I'm actually becoming a friend. We're going to be doing a bike ride tomorrow, which I'm going to be in a car riding behind them as they drive their bike. That's his passion, by the way. But I'll say this, I can't not be more excited to have this leadership, this passion, the vision that we now have in our secretary and our chairman, and not only that, but of course with President Trump and with our Secretary McMahon. So we're in a very, very great space. And my goal is actually to make sure that Utah will lead in that area, that we will make sure that folks know that we're doing things right here, and that our experience can hopefully be benefit of everybody else. So that being said, Tim, would you mind just saying a few words?
Well, Burgess, thank you for those kind comments. And let me say, I know they're true. Knowing Burgess, I know that he does not involve himself in puffery or any other thing that we would call like that. And we had a spirited opportunity for the chairmanship position. And after 16 years of fighting to stay on that committee myself, when I was put on Energy and Commerce Committee, and not supposed to have any other committees then, but there are very few people like Burgess Owens and me who desire to stay on this crucial committee, Education Workforce. I've told the speaker, and I continue to tell the other committee chairman, that you think you're A committees. I am an A committee. Without education that leads to a qualified workforce, we don't have a country. We can look out on beautiful scenery like this, and I am kind of jealous when I see that. That is just gorgeous. I live in the Irish Hills of Michigan, which is beautiful too, but they are hills. They aren't mountains like that. We'll keep our our waterways, the Great Lakes, fabulous. I have Lake Erie and Lake Michigan in my district. We love that. But it's a country that is able to enjoy itself because for years and years and years, we led the world in education, we led it in workforce. And we proved what could be done here that couldn't be done in other places, at least at that point in time. They are challenging us now. And sadly, we've gone backwards in some areas of education. I think Burgess and I agree on the fact that, as the president has said, he wants to abolish the Department of Education, not simply just to push back against bureaucracy, but to say, wait a second. The reality is that Salt Lake City has a better handle on what their students need than any well-meaning bureaucrat in Washington does. And I think that's where we're pushing. Let me just stop here as well and say something that I think speaks to what goes on here in the mindset and the character and the DNA of Utahns, or Utahns that were welcomed in. I'm getting over the fact that he was originally a Buckeye. Go Blue. But I heard the governor of your state speak this morning, and I hope his basically a moral sermon that he gave at the end of the press conference would be pushed out all across this country. I know he was disappointed deeply that it was a Utahn that committed this heinous crime. It wasn't a student at the university, and it didn't speak for Utahns. But the moral principles that he lined up as he spoke are principles that Burgess and I want to see communicated in our educational systems and give entities like the local districts here in Utah and in my state of Michigan the opportunity to lead the way with competition, with choice, and with a solemn resolve to make sure that those three things of importance we get right: the student, the parent, and the teacher. Those three, if they're working and working together well, we will succeed. And then we have the workforce issues that can take and creatively use all that is pushed forward in our educational process. And while America will rebound again in unbelievable ways, and we won't be tied to social media and philosophies that divide us, we find a united purpose. Burgess has already stated some of the things that took place in that working families tax cut. And that's what we're working toward. That's what we were looking at. And that's why this table is filled with people that address those concerns. But we had an opportunity to do things that we want to expand upon in Reconciliation 2.0 that the speaker's talking about now, and possibly a Reconciliation 3.0 before the end of this term, to put other things in place that speak to how we get more apprenticeship programs, how we expand Pell to touch in those short-term areas, not only on a limited few, but expand it out to proprietary schools, apprenticeship programs, really touching those training opportunities to get people in the workplace where they're needed. In talking to industry, my district, heavy manufacturing leading toward the auto industry, agriculture, to have no tax on overtime, up to $25,000. Give some of my workers a breather to say, well, I'm tired. We've done a lot of overtime. We've tried to catch up. We're seeing some impact of businesses coming back to the United States, but we're tired. But you know, if you don't tax them overtime, maybe I'll work some more overtime. And that impacts the whole labor issue that our corporations and our small businesses especially are wrestling with. So this bill that we'll be talking about today that became the Working Families Tax Cut is crucial as a first step, even with getting the tuition tax credit in. This guy he was a fullback. In the old terminology, he was a fullback going through all of the line to make sure some of that got into this bill, and it did. So it is now law. We don't have to just talk about it. It is law. And my governor, if she's unwilling to give my constituents what Indiana and Ohio that border my district give to their constituents in education choice, she'll pay the price. I don't think she's willing to do that. So I think that will give incentive to Michigan to enjoy greater choice opportunity than we've ever had before as well. So having said all of that, Burgess, thank you for inviting me here, not only for the motorcycle ride tomorrow. As chairman of the Congressional Motorcycle Caucus, I just have to do that. And we're going to enjoy that. But to have a Super Bowl ring bearer as my vice chair on this committee, as well as chairing the Higher Education and Workforce Development Subcommittee, it's a pleasure to be with you. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, we're going to go around and just introduce the stakeholders here. And would you mind, Beth, to start off and just give a little background on top of it?
Just my introduction.
Yes, yes.
Hi, my name is Beth Akers. I'm a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., and have the privilege of also being a contributor to the Sutherland Institute here. So I have the distinct privilege of working in Washington, D.C., as you do, and living here in Utah. I'm a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, which means I get to study and comment on all things higher education, finance, and related.
If you just, everybody just take a minute also, just to kind of give an idea where your focus might be, what you'd like to see as your industry is kind of bringing more efforts to this process.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm excited to be here today to sort of celebrate a lot of the progress that was made with this most recent legislation. I'm someone who has for a long time argued for the changes that we've seen here, namely simplification of the student lending program, putting in more accountability standards for colleges to deliver students into jobs, and to put reasonable caps on loans to get the conversation away from forgiveness and into putting people into loans that are affordable for them to repay. So that's where my work is focused.
Great. Thank you, Beth. Thank you so much.
Brant Beckwith. I'm the head of the American Heritage School System. We are a private, nonprofit, K-12, Latter-day Saint-oriented Christian school system. We have 2 physical campuses that have about 2,000 students, K-12, and micro schools and home schools all over the country, and many students internationally and around the world in online platforms. I've been the head of this school system for about 20 years. We have really applauded the Utah State Utah Fits All School Choice funding legislation and program that has been introduced here. It's unique even among the school choice funding legislation in the country. And we hope to be able to see some things federally, if it happens, modeled after what's the good things in Utah here. Dr. Colosimo, who introduced himself, and I both have schools that were in the largest, maybe top 10 organizations that were chosen by parents who, once they had funding to choose, decided to take it to an option. I also should say I'm a public school graduate, and I think public education is important, but so is having choice. Parent choice is important, and so excited to get into this conversation today.
Thank you. My name is Melva Sine. I'm the president of the Utah Restaurant Association. I've been with the association for approximately 32 years. And so we have a great program called ProStart that we introduced Congressman Owens to just a couple of weeks ago. And it's our culinary high school program. So the students leave with all of their certifications, with everything they need to go out into the industry and actually pursue a career. We're a school to career opportunity, and so they can go on and get secondary education if they want to. We offer apprenticeships, mentorships. We have all kinds of programs associated with ProStart. It's a nationwide program. We graduate over 1,400 students a year, and our industry has never needed them more. We need managers. We need students at every level that want to come in and create a career path for themselves that can last a lifetime. And those students who do not stay in the culinary industry have built the skills of teamwork and being on time and those things that make an employee a valued partner in the whatever job it is that they determine to take. And we're able to do that with 10th, 11th, and 12th graders throughout the state of Utah. We're in small communities like Bryce Canyon, Utah, with a high school of like 42 students. And we're in big school districts like the Salt Lake School District or Granite School District. So we continue. Ours is a public school program, but we also do work with many charter schools in the state. We offer the opportunity for ProStart for anyone who is interested. Students sign up for themselves. Teachers, we train the teachers, we train the students. So it's a great opportunity. And we see these things that Congress is now doing that is going to help us help children love and appreciate education. Because that is where we feel like there is sometimes, I'm sure you have children, my grandchildren say to me, I hate school. Like they're third, fourth graders. I'm like you can't do, yeah, just as frightening to me. You can't hate school when you're a third or fourth grader. Somehow we have to instill in them. And through programs like these, we will be able to do that and build our children into loving adults and who want to, that want to proceed with all of the things that we see great about our nation.
Chair Walberg, great to see you. Congressman Owens, always a pleasure. I'm Scott Pulsfer. I'm the president of Western Governors University. I think it is certainly a privilege and an opportunity for WGU to continue to collaborate on advancing policy that aligns with access, quality, and outcomes in higher education. I think that WGU was fundamentally organized and founded by governors of 19 Western states. I first always like to point out that you have to ask yourself the question of why did governors actually think it was important to establish a private nonprofit institution when they all had their respective public institutions. You certainly can see that there are many residents of their respective states for whom education was not a catalyst to opportunity. It started propagating privilege more than expanding opportunity. And so I think that WGU has long been partnered with advancing policy that increases the quality and relevancy of education to the workforce, that ensures that we are readying individuals that have the knowledge, skill, and ability that are needed in the economy to advance the innovative areas that are key to the continued progress that we see in the U.S. I think there are a number of key items that we like to emphasize always at WGU is that, access without completion is a scam. So we very much focus on ensuring that the individuals that started WGU have a high probability of success. The other key thing is that we focus on credentials that are relevant to the opportunity that they pursue, so that we know that credentials with no market value is not a matter or concern of the students that we're trying to serve, and certainly that would be good policy across the whole. We also know that we have to continue to invest in expanding access among so many underrepresented populations. But let me maybe just come back to, I think, a key point, which is that we at WGU believe in the inherent worth of every individual. We also believe that they have the innate capacity for learning. We know that if given the opportunity, they all have something big to contribute. That, I think, was the premise of even the Morrill Act in 1862. It was certainly, I think, the premise of the GI Bill, or even the establishment of the 1965 Higher Ed Act and the Student Finance Complex, that it was to actually ensure that education is the greatest catalyst for people to change their lives for the better. But somewhere we lost that. We lost the accountability for ensuring the relevancy of the learning to the opportunity. We lost the accountability for the cost of delivering that. We see so many great provisions in this bill that really increases institutional accountability for ensuring that those students they serve complete, that what they actually attain is relevant to the opportunity, and that they actually achieve it with a cost that's appropriate to the return. Lastly, I'll just say we're excited about also the workforce Pell, because we know that the highest growth that's occurring right now in the post-secondary sector is actually in sub-degree credentials. We also know that's consistent with the very large and growing population of working adults who need to upskill and reskill for the rapidly changing workforce. And so the prospect in the advent of the workforce Pell system increases the access to highly relevant pathways that can help individuals reskill for the opportunities that are going to emerge in the future. So we're excited about those things. Great to be with you.
Thank you. I'm Gailey Colosimo, and I am the principal of Juan Diego Catholic High School, which is about probably 3 miles down the road from here. And Juan Diego was founded about 25 years ago. It is a much like Grant's school. It's a preschool through 12th grade campus. We have about 2,500 students that matriculate with us. We're the largest Catholic school in the state of Utah and one of the largest private schools in the state of Utah. And I've been the principal there for all 25 years. I started the school. I actually began 4 years prior to that, just with an idea and no money and no land, but all that came to fruition and been doing that ever since. About 7 years ago, I started an organization called the Utah Private Schools Association because we were really not very impactful politically, and we really weren't very organized. And what I found out is a lot of private schools don't really want to be part of an association, but 105 schools do want to be part of it. And the mission, the word of association is probably not the best term, but the mission of the Utah Private Schools Association is singular, that we seek legislation to allow families to implement their role, parents to implement their role as the primary educators of their student. That's our belief, and that's why we created the association. And in the last 7 years, we have been successful in getting 6 or 7 laws passed. And the most prominent of those laws is the Utah Fits All Educational Savings Account Scholarship that we passed in 2022. And we began that program with $30 million, and then we moved it to 80 million, and then this past year it was 100 million, and next year for sure it's going to be 120 million. The law itself is universal, and what it's based on, that founding principle, is that it's the family's job to educate their children, and it's the state's job to provide the resources to allow them to do that. And it shouldn't matter if a family wants to educate them in a homeschool, a private school, a micro school, an online school, a public school, or a charter school. The state's job is to provide the resources. And that what we think is that when parents are put in place as the primary educators, where they can choose what's best for their child, the greatest outcomes will occur. When we began this project 7 years ago, and then in 2021, prior to the passing of Utah Fits All, I met with Governor Cox and President Adams of the Senate and Speaker Wilson at that time, and we made a presentation to them. And what we said about Utah is that when Brigham Young came into this valley 200 years ago, he brought with him 4 fundamental values, and that the state of Utah is a city on the hill because it was built on the foundation of faith, family, education, and work. And it's those 4 principles that have driven the success of the state of Utah for the past 200 years. And what we challenged Governor Cox at that time is that in 25 years, in the year 2047, Utah will celebrate its bicentennial. It'll be 200 years old. And the future of Utah, the success of Utah, is going to be whether or not we stay true to those 4 fundamental values that Brigham Young espoused 200 years ago: faith, family, education, and work. And if we stay true to those things, Utah will continue to be a city on the hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Congressman Owens, for the opportunity to be involved in the roundtable today. My name is Vic Hockett. I'm an Associate Commissioner for the Utah System of Higher Education and oversee Talent Ready Utah Department for the state. We want to first start by excusing Commissioner Landward from the roundtable this morning. He's extremely sorry for not being able to be here with the press conference and all the other events that are going on from the campus event. He really wanted to be involved in this. He was really sorry he couldn't be here this morning, but we are proud of him and proud of our governor for their resolve and for their resiliency as they're leading us through the situation and how they're pulling us forward at the same time. So excuse Commissioner Landward. So you get me today representing Commissioner Landward as well as Talent Ready Utah. If you're not familiar with Talent Ready Utah, we were legislatively created, in 2018 in the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. The whole purpose was to have an industry-facing organization to work with employers to identify where we need to be shaping education. I joined Talent Ready Utah about 4 years ago. My background is private sector. I have worked a little bit in higher education too, and have been on both sides of that divide, not being able to grow a business because of lack of talent, as well as developing programs in higher education to meet needs of employers. And so our role in the state statutorily is to pull together government, education, and workforce providers so that we can identify gaps. So we can look at our systems of K-12, our systems of higher education, and really identify what are the short-term and long-term workforce solutions that we should be building for our state. I will say the state legislature has been incredibly gracious to us. We run 24 different programs from K-12 through higher education. And in terms of being responsive to workforce, we have everything from short-term programs through PhDs and incumbent workforce skills. And so very excited to be here today, talk more about how this bill we feel is going to have a major positive impact on the system of higher education, which is represented by community colleges, regional universities. We have 2 R1 institutions in Utah, which is rare for a state of our size. And we also have an incredible system of technical colleges, which are very flexible, very agile, and very responsive to the needs of Utah employers. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
My name is Casey Hill, and today I represent the National Federation of Independent Businesses. I act as the state director of NFIB here in Utah. NFIB is a advocacy, member-driven organization that represents the voice of small business in the state of Utah and nationally. As perfect lead-in for what Vic was just, sorry, you're not Vic. Where are you? You are Vic. Okay, sorry. I just apologize. What was just being said here is that the biggest challenge that we face as small businesses in our state is labor, and just qualified, skilled labor is something that we hear from our employers every day. And so the efforts that are being made both in this bill and here in our state, while significant, are still a challenge that our employers are seeing. In addition to my role as state director of NFIB, I've been a year and a half ago was privileged and invited, felt privileged and to be invited by our governor to serve on the Weber State Board of Trustees. So I have the opportunity to serve in that role. And as part of that, for the last year, I've spent time as a member of the Board of Trustees of Davis Tech as well. So we're kind of right there in the middle of working on these issues on the front lines, and grateful for the opportunity to be here today and talk about these issues.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate it. What we're going to do is just kind of go around and do some Q&A. I wanted, before we get started, is just introduce real quickly Andre Lucy. Just want to say, we were talking just yesterday. He came to the office, and I've had a chance to visit your facility. That's Sadler Rail, and Sweden has invested in Utah back in 2016. Came here and decided they were going to build a education to workforce model that is so Utah. And so I on the spur of the moment said, listen, you got to at least show up. I want to introduce you to the chairman. And this is what we do, though. This is Utah. Across the board in different industries, we're trying to figure out a way to make sure the best product that we can produce are our kids. That's what we want to export. Really want to keep them here, to be honest with you. But we want them to have those options of going anywhere and throughout this country, around the world, and be the very best what they do. So I'm going to do this. We're going to go through a couple Q&A. I do want to say one thing that I picked up out of the conversation we had a minute ago, for everybody introducing themselves. Notice the high expectations we have here at this roundtable for our kids. That's where it all begins. You have to believe that we can accomplish great things if given the opportunity, if given the opportunity to educate and to think outside the box. Scott, you mentioned GI Bill. My grandfather was was a third grade dropout. He's a business owner, very, very proud of what he did. But his son, my dad, because of GI Bill, was able to go and get his PhD at Ohio State. And Michigan guy, I have to always make that point. But just think about how that changed for generations. That changed for generations a family, because they were able to get the education and apply that education, then have a dad that was just so much in education, he wanted every child around him to experience the same thing. So that's what we have an opportunity to do. And I cannot think of a better state than Utah. The way we collaborate, guys, the small network we have, and the way we talk to each other and make sure we get things done. I'm just so excited about being part of that process. So we're going to go around and just ask a few questions. We have about another hour or so to do that. If we have time at the very end, if there's questions from the audience that you guys might want to add, I want this to be a conversation. So as we talk through this process, if there's anything you guys can add to on a question or an answer, please feel free. I think what we can do as we talk through this process, I believe in the mastermind. And the mastermind is just, we all get together, and from this body, we come with a different, even better conversation and mindset and goal setting. So we'll start off with Melva. We had a chance with, I think it was just last week, I think it was. So impressed. But there's over 6,000 restaurants located across the United States, across Utah, with about 123,000 workers. With the no tax on tips, which is a deduction up to $25,000 per year. Could you tell us how that has impacted tip workers in Utah, or will impact them as this new policy change has been implemented?
Yes, we're actually seeing that. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a very loud voice, so sometimes I don't need a microphone. But so we're seeing the effects of that currently with the fact that we have 123,000 employees, because after the pandemic, we went from 111,000 employees to 63,000. And we have been working to build back up our workforce in those areas. And so anything that can come along that can help incentivize these people to want to work, because our industry is an industry of work. You have to love work. You have to love hard work. You have to love people. And so this bill has helped us to entertain and create more job opportunities. So the industry in Utah is finally starting to grow, not just stay kind of at a stalemate and whatnot. We're actually seeing that number 6,000, right? So that we are seeing restaurants on the increase. So we have a great need. And this bill is incentivizing people to come into our industry and experience it. It's also raising the wage factor in our industry, because right now, and these are figures from Indeed and other people who are hiring agencies, say that a tipped employee in the state of Utah now averages $26 an hour. That's the minimum that they make. Some of our tipped workers make as much as $40 an hour and whatnot. So this has been most helpful and most appreciated. We loved the fact when then candidate Trump started to announce that this was something that he saw, and he's in our industry, right? He is a hospitality expert in our industry of hotels and food and those types of things. And so I think he realized firsthand how impactful this would be. And so we are seeing the benefits of that in the state of Utah as we continue to grow our workforce, and as we continue through ProStart to train our workforce. These kids come out ready to go to work. They know, I need that. It's amazing. I would turn my restaurant over to one of them with all of the education and certification and everything that they're getting. So we so appreciate that, Congress, and that you, both of you, have been able to put forth an effort that makes work, regardless of what kind of work it is, that makes work, worthy of people entering the workforce, and making it so that our young people aren't afraid, that they actually want to engage and get a job, get an apprenticeship, be trained, be learned about whatever it is pathway they want to take forward. So thank you, and we appreciate.
If I could jump in, Melva, on that. Some of us took the advice of persons wiser than ourselves to take the opportunity as we're going through this to write on the receipt that the waitress or waiter would bring to us, I love no tax on tips. And that started a discussion when they came back, and it was amazing. Melva, you're absolutely right. It was more than just the money for them. It was the fact that they were appreciated to be tipped, but also they could make more. They could choose how to make more, and they wouldn't be just the hourly employee in some of their minds. They were entrepreneurs. They were independent workers. And so that no tax on tips, I don't know how many waitresses who were very polite, did good service, but then were very talkative when they saw that written on their receipts. So
Absolutely.
it's in the industry. I think that expands them.
Thank you.
Interesting anecdote that I heard from one of our small business owners who is a restaurant owner recently. He had a young lady who had previously been kind of back of the staff or back of the kitchen staff. And when she figured out this new equation of being able to make a little bit more money and take home more, she actually came and requested a customer-facing position and more of an opportunity, realizing that now the economics of that made a little bit more sense to her. And I just think about one of the things that us in the older generation, sometimes we look at the younger generation who seem to always have their head in their phone, and they don't do the social interaction maybe as well as we would like them to. Giving incentive to those individuals to actually move and push themselves kind of past that point of where they're not maybe comfortable, but because they have an economic incentive to do that. Again, it's just an anecdote, but I also think it's meaningful to hear that from someone who's saying, like, this is what I'm seeing on the front lines of our business. We actually have individuals who are approaching managers saying, I want to interact with customers so that I can benefit in a more significant way.
Can I just say, add to that, what drives our culture truly is that the free market, the enterprise, the free market mindset, taking that risk, and to ask to go into that niche where it's based on tips, you're taking a risk. It means that you have to be thinking a little bit more of how can I serve? How can I make a difference? How can I make sure that person, when they leave me, they're going to feel better, so they'll give me a reward for that. And I can't say enough, and we're going to talk about this case. It's going to be next, actually, my next question, but we're going to talk about really the power of the small business owner, that mindset, because that entrepreneur is really where the idea of thinking outside the box, service, legacy, giving back to the community, all the things that we experience here comes to that mindset, and that business owner powers a middle class. And a middle class is a shade of that mindset. So you wonder why we're such an attractive state, why we're such an attractive country, because we're driven by the entrepreneurial mindset. And the middle class gets bigger and bigger, and that's what we have to make sure we're always thinking about. That's what I love about this bill. The middle class is finally saying, we appreciate you. We appreciate your work. We appreciate your tenacity, your discipline, your facing obstacles and overcome. We appreciate that. We're going to reward you. And as that continues to grow, so does this remarkable culture we want to hold on to. So anyway, you want to go next?
I thought I'd better just add the fact that if you do write that on the receipt, make sure you give a better than normal tip.
Okay. You have a question that you want to
Let me go over, President Pulsifer. You've been in front of our committee a number of times while I've been on that committee, and we appreciate it. And I know that we won't charge you with fraud saying that's Western governors, because now you're moving east as well quite a bit, and
More students in the east now than in the west.
yeah,
So-
and they're coming our way. That's a pretty well kept secret by the name, but I guess from the moment I heard about the size and scope of your endeavor for education, and then realized it wasn't brick and mortar, except for your professors. and the faculty that worked with the students online and other settings to make it work. As you think about this bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, that once was some other name. We're trying not to use that name because it focuses on things that really aren't as important. We talked about accountability. Risk sharing was a term at the time. There were stronger provisions in for workforce Pell and expanded opportunities, apprenticeships, and the things like that. With an opportunity of having possibly a reconciliation 2.0, where Burgess and I can push to put some things the Senate took out because they grew weak-kneed on some of things, and it wasn't just parliamentarian. What would you suggest could be next steps to make this bill better for your endeavor in education that is expanded? I hear on WJR radio out of Detroit, your advertisement. I see it on TV. But the focus you have is getting education where the people are who need the education in the quickest, easiest, most effective, and highest education opportunity way as possible. What would you add?
That's a really good question. And I appreciate the department's already taking up some of that work on the negotiated rulemaking. And we're grateful to actually have our head of financial aid being a negotiator on that committee. So we're excited about being able to contribute to that. I think one of the key things that came out of the House side versus the Senate side, as you referenced, Chair Walberg, is that there are some programs for which the cost of delivery is actually quite substantial, and notably in certain spaces that are vitally needed and necessary in the workforce, but for which those positions don't necessarily have great economic income levels. So if you consider, just take simply teacher preparation, especially in a state like Utah, where it's actually even quite difficult to deliver a teacher preparation degree in 4 years. Thankfully at WGU, we have a competency-based model, so you can actually go faster than traditional models of that. But the cost of delivery, you have to consider that institutions, you do want to put greater pressure or incentives on them to bend the arc of the cost curve in the delivery. But even as they do that, they can't fully influence the market compensation for those jobs that are desperately needed. And so what the nice thing would be in the new negotiated rulemaking is, how do we actually contemplate those programs that, in fact, the straight earnings premium or the do no harm in the bill actually considers the cost of delivering those programs. So it's this balance between institutional risk sharing to say, how do you continue to reduce the cost? How do you also invest in expanding access to individuals who weren't previously participating? So that was one of the nice things in the Promise Grant as part of the House side of the bill, to say, are there incentives that can in fact be advanced, the regulatory mechanisms to institutions to in fact increase access among underrepresented populations, while also incentives to reduce the cost of their delivery, such that when those individuals are completing those programs, that if they come out earning $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 or whatever, they won't be penalized as the institution goes for providing those programs into teacher preparation or into frontline healthcare workers that are earning in kind of allied health positions that are earning at that rate, et cetera. The other thing, recognizing that there's opportunities for stackability, is that the workforce credentialing and the workforce Pell, we certainly would love to see it go beyond clock hours. There are many programs that can in fact be sub 15 credits in the academic programs. They're going to be very, very relevant to the working adults who may already have degrees that can start to in fact also be increased in their accessibility by expanding the workforce Pell provisions and some of that as well. Anyway, the last thing I would just say is that be mindful of the Pell limits. I think we, even through the President's Forum in partnership with them, which is a collaborative or collective of 20 plus institutional presidents, that we just want to ensure, we don't believe it's the intent of Congress whatsoever, but that we don't want Pell to become a last dollar program versus a first dollar program, such that if we're not careful in how you establish Pell amounts or Pell eligibility amounts, you then after the fact figure out how much then other funding is going to come in state level programs, et cetera. It used to be like full Pell eligibility, you knew that amount, et cetera. And so I think that's one thing we're just concerned about, to make sure that we don't distort the way individuals actually recognize the federal money that's available to them to pursue workforce relevant credentials that have an economic value, that doesn't start running the risk of Pell becoming a last dollar program. So that's just some of the things I'd offer.
Quick question. You mentioned, for those who don't know, the Promise Grant. Would you just kind of explain that so that?
Yeah, the on the House side, we are quite supportive of, but to be fair, the bill itself does advance significant institutional accountability for the economic value out of the programs that they offer. It's really, really important. But the difference in the bill or the law that we now have is that earnings premium, it has to be there, otherwise it creates harm, meaning that it costs more to get something that you weren't earning more than a high school graduate. So why did you get all this federal money to help you teach a student to graduate to get something that they didn't earn more with? And so that's just a straight eligibility. That program, it's like a binary outcome. If after 3 years you aren't meeting that earnings premium, is like you're no longer eligible. So students going into that program would not have federal loan eligibility or federal Pell eligibility. In the notion of the Promise Grant in the original House bill, it actually balanced if you are an institution that is doing a really good job of expanding access to underrepresented communities of learners, whether those low income backgrounds, rural backgrounds, underrepresented racial and ethnic groups, et cetera, that was a really good thing, because these have historically underconsumed in terms of post-secondary. But it also increased that, it combined that Promise Grant with, in fact, the risk sharing, which is you can't enroll them and not have them complete.
Yeah.
You have to deliver completion, and you have to deliver market relevant economic value add programs. I think through regulation, there's an opportunity to kind of increase the mechanisms by which the law is actually administered in a way to say, how do we ensure that institutions continue to invest in programs that may cost more to deliver? And just as a matter of fact, I'll say teacher preparation, it takes longer duration. So you actually have costs for longer programs. Plus you also have to manage all the demonstration teacher placement, et cetera. That happens also in healthcare. We have clinical placements, et cetera. We know that our teacher prep programs and our nursing programs, they are a higher cost to deliver than a bachelor's in finance or cybersecurity or computer science. The earnings premiums are really high in those fields, low cost to deliver. Low earnings premium here, high cost to deliver. And so we want to make sure that in regulatory considerations, that institutions are both incentivized to increase the relevancy of the programs, to increase access among underrepresented populations, while also holding them accountability for completion and economic value add outcomes.
Okay, thank you so much.
First, President, I loved your comments on market relevant credentialing. I think too, as we're looking at the future 2.0 and how this bill can continue to impact the U.S., is maintaining a customer centric approach. And so for us with Talent Ready Utah, our main customer is industry. And so we think about our incoming customer into higher education, which is the student. We always have to take them first in consideration. The other thing is, what are our customers willing to buy? And so at the end of the day, as we're educating students on all levels of credentialing, apprenticeships, certifications through PhD, does industry value what they're buying? And so I think maintaining our close relationships with the private sector to truly identify what are the requisite skills and competencies at each level of education that qualifies students for a job, just making sure that we continue to keep them at the forefront of our industry partners as a customer. You mentioned Lucy earlier, a great partner with the Track Apprenticeship Program. They were the first to the table saying, let's bridge a program between K-12 and higher education that makes sure that the students that are coming out of this are ready to go to work. And again, appreciate your comments, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I just say this, as we talk with the LER later on, we have a little presentation. You just nailed it. It is a matter of finding out what the need is for the industries and relating that to what the students really want to go through to get there. So we'll kind of address that later. I'd like to real quickly, talk about the entrepreneur a lot because I have such a respect for those who dream, risk, sometimes fail, and they have to come back and do it all over again, but some kind of way they figure it out and become better from it forward, and the community benefits from it. So I'm going to have just a real quick conversation with Casey. There's this bill provides roughly $90 billion tax cuts for hourly workers by allowing them to deduct overtime pay from their federal income tax. Do you think that's going to also impact and attract workers to the Utah workforce?
Thank you, Congressman. I don't think there's any question that that is already having an impact. If you think about the individuals who are typically earning or working overtime, those are typically some of your, highest producing, hardest working individuals. And to further incentivize them to work and to engage more and take more of their hard-earned dollars home is significant for our employers. What we have seen in Utah, well, just to kind of really draw a bright line or highlight how significant this is just for the state of Utah. 99% of our employers in the state of Utah are smaller than 500 employees. So, essentially, every employer that we could think of right now, Utah is a small business-driven state, and so anything that impacts in a positive way small businesses will impact Utah in a significantly positive way. Utah's dominated by pass-through small businesses. So any individual side tax relief really goes right to individuals and their businesses and allows them to reinvest that either in themselves, their employees, or their business in capital projects. And we at least again, kind of anecdotally, we're kind of early enough in this process. It's hard to just say specifically here are the numbers for it. But anecdotally, we've seen and heard from a lot of our business owners in the state that they're very excited about that specific provision. Again, mostly in what it does for them to be able to have qualified employees that they can rely upon, and those individuals are now incentivized to want to stick around and work that extra hour when it makes sense for them to do that. The other thing that's been significant for small business owners is the child tax credit enhancements that came with the legislation. Again, that flows directly to value to the owners and their employees, who are usually, in many cases, in small businesses, their family members, and so it's a significant benefit for them. But we think the impact of this is clearly already being seen, and I don't see this as a bad thing, but our state legislature is likely to hold an upcoming special session in the next month or so, and part of what they are already trying to adjust for is the impact on the state's income tax that this is going to have, because it's a significant number, a hole that they're now trying to figure out. Okay, what are we going to do? And you know what? The idea of shrinking government's not the worst idea ever. And so our state legislature is now looking at the possibility of the number I've seen placed on it is up to about $300 million in the impact of just not having either tips or overtime taxed. So that's meaningful. And what that $300 million is now it's in the pockets of small business owners, individuals, and their workers. So it's a great thing for businesses in Utah.
Thank you, Casey. Casey, by the way, comes from a family of entrepreneurs, so
yeah,
I've always appreciated what you guys do.
Thank you, and I will say this, I speak from personal experience. I own 3 small businesses, collectively employ about between 20 and 25 people, depending on the time of year and those kind of things. But my father has owned a small business for his entire career, just recently retired. I mean, these are real people, real stories. We're very proud to be a part of it, both myself personally, our company, and we really do see the impact of this. Monday, many of us, if we filed an extension, are going to be paying taxes, and we're grateful that we're paying less of those taxes.
And also, we often forget when we talk about the loss of revenue to the states by giving tax dollars back to citizens. We also have to recognize that as they have it, in most cases, revenues goes up for the federal government or for the states because people are spending, investing and saving as well. Beth, I want to move over to the egghead branch of the world, and I say
as a
that
compliment.
and I say that positively, especially to an economist. In the working families tax cut legislation, we thankfully, I believe, eliminated the uncapped graduate student loan. I mean, there was no cap, and you could go in graduate programs on and on and on. And in most cases, especially under the Biden plan, you didn't have to pay it back in the end. So we eliminated that uncapped. We also really restructured the student, the Parent Plus loans that were, in some cases, putting parents back into hock again after years of paying on a mortgage, now taking out a second mortgage. And now, of course, we say that all of the students' undergrad or graduate loan has to be used up first before we go to the Parent Plus. What impact will that have on educational opportunity, the cost of education, and ultimately, I think, the outcome?
Well, first, let me just be a bit of a cheerleader for these changes. For those who don't know what a think tank professional does, we sort of sit on the sidelines of your work and complain and throw criticisms and occasionally celebrate the work that you're doing. And
we quote you when you say it right.
Only when we say the good things, it seems. But one of the things I've been throwing into this conversation for years is this issue I have with the graduate student lending problem. I mean, we've had headlines in the New York Times, the Washington Post about these outrageous student loan balances for something like 2 decades now. And if you go back to before it was all about student loan cancellation, there was a period of baristas that had $300,000 in student loan debt. And that was sort of the theme of these things. What people didn't realize is that these were all the product of people borrowing for professional and graduate degrees. And so most of those baristas went on to get jobs at prominent law firms eventually, and they tend to repay their loans, or at least historically they did. But there was a tremendous shift as Democrats made pretty significant policy changes around the student loan program that meant that people really didn't have to continue to pay back their student loans anymore. And what we saw is that a lot of people with these very high balance graduate student loans were not on the hook to repay. So even though they had made a good bet, they'd got a good ROI on their investment, they were doing quite well in the economy, they weren't being asked to repay. So these loans that were once a revenue generator for the federal budget have become just a tremendous drag. Also, I think it's an opportunity where people have gone into debt that ultimately isn't affordable to them, because at the same time, we've had an expansion of graduate loan graduate programs, particularly master's degree programs, that are concentrated in low value, because those are the ones that are really easy to start. Economists talk about subsidizing industries results in very automatic increase in prices. I call that basic economics, but in education, we often refer to that as the Bennett hypothesis. For a long time, it was an open question. Does the eligibility for uncapped loans drive increase in prices in the graduate student loan market? It was actually a researcher at BYU, an economist, who did the groundbreaking work that identified that there was almost a 1-for-1 increase in tuition dollars charged to students as a result of that lifting of the cap of eligibility for loans. So this is a tremendous improvement, both for consumer protections, from the fiscal side of things, and also really pushes on institutions to offer programs that make sense financially. Students, if they want to go above these caps that are in place, will have to go to the private market. And we know that the private market is looking at the return on investment before they're willing to make these loans. So this is good for the American economy, this is good for individuals, and it's good for fiscal policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Grant, we've been circling a lot lately about the heritage, the great heritage that our country has always had, but not being taught. And so I just wanted, how can you talk more about how teaching students to appreciate the country we live in, how you approach that, and how we can maybe replicate that process?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Owens. So, as the name of our school implies, American Heritage, we believe that there's something special about America. We say unapologetically that we think that there is such a thing as American exceptionalism, but we don't say that only Americans, only those in the United States can be exceptional. We think there's some principles that were built into our governing founding documents that are truly exceptional, that sit on the shoulders of so many great, historical events and governments around the world, and that's special, and we should celebrate that. And so from kindergarten, having children celebrate the fact that, there was a creator God revered in the Declaration of Independence, and that human dignity, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is universal. And let's protect that as a special government among governments, right? These are things we start celebrating in kindergarten all the way through high school, where they defend a 20-page thesis on a controversial topic that relates to governance, and then we want them to go out and use it. Go propose a bill to your local mayor or state senator and see what happens. But base it upon your faith, upon your family, upon principles that endure, values, right? This isn't just American exceptionalism. This is how humans can magnify their dignity. And so this is what we stand for, right? It's not Christian nationalist. It's not any specific religion. We have students that come from the whole entire faith spectrum. Christians, Jews, Muslims at our school, those that don't affiliate with a certain organized religion, but they come because they believe that there is something to the human impulse to believe in values and to have faith. And I said, this is a workforce and education committee. Well, I love what you said, Congressman Owens, about the fact that it is the middle class, it is the small businesses, Casey, that really are the lifeblood of thriving societies. But if you think about why we go to work and why we go to school, we go to work and we go to school so that we can support thriving families, so that we can preserve and defend and promote our faith. That's why we do those things. And so I love that this, all of this is being brought together in some of these wonderful bills that give small businesses and entrepreneurs independence and choice, that give small schools, and by the way, private schools are small businesses. Think about that for a minute. We are accountable to our communities and even to the state in many ways, health codes, right? But we are also accountable to parents. And many of the parents in small businesses, small schools are small business owners, right? You see how this goes together? And we try to teach this and inculcate this kind of thinking, entrepreneurial, governmental thinking, et cetera, in our schools.
I'm ready to stand and do the pledge.
Can I just say something? This interests me because as you were talking, I thought about my upbringing in deep South Tallahassee, Florida, a segregated community, but we had these same values. I can remember walking to school in the morning in 7th grade to go raise the flag and being reverent and making sure it never touched the ground. And because we had our dads had just come back from World War II, so we had this belief and this confidence and respect for this process. So it's not that we have not had it, we just have to bring it back. So I'm so thankful for your entrepreneurs who have this mission to bring back those values that we were brought up with. And we finally have an administration that's going to be working with you to help you get it done. So.
I appreciate that focus. And the answers that we've had from you all today have been so insightful in the reason why this entire piece of legislation was put together. We had the dubious distinction of finding $330 billion of savings in our portion of this bill. That was the second only to energy and commerce, the numbers of dollars. And most people looked at it and said, how are you going to find that in education and workforce areas? Well, we found $350 billion. We went beyond that. All, again, substantiating, Beth, what you said, that when we move in that direction of doing away with some of these things that really are holding back educational progress, but also monetary process, we fail. When we go the other direction, we succeed. I'm going to go back to you, Dr. Colosimo, right? Colosimo or Colosimo? Pardon? I answer to Mark and Donnie as well as Pim Walberg. Yeah. as long as there's food connected with it. I appreciated the fact of you being the head of a large Catholic private school entity, but working with a broad spectrum here, especially in Utah, of religious values and really correlating them together to make a difference, and seeing that the purpose of education is first and foremost to make sure that parents understand that they are the educators. I fought the homeschool issue in Michigan when I was in the state legislature. The fact that I, as a father, only asked the public school system at that time to supplement my education that my wife and I were doing for our 3 kids. And we appreciated the supplemental opportunity that they would provide to us, but we were still the educators. Your efforts have produced legislation in this state, moving it ahead of many states in what you do for choice. But how do you continue to inculcate in the minds of incoming parents that we want to expand more in the future? We need that. And a child tax credit and the expansion there is going to hopefully be a help there as well. But what are the best practices in moving that concept forward and not letting us go backward again and saying that it's any school system, whether it's a choice system or whether it's the traditional public school system, that they can never get back to where it was?
It's a process, it's an educational process, and we see school choice as a movement. It's not a law. It's not something you just pass, but it's a movement, and the movement rests on this mindset that when we can create a world where parents really are put back in charge of their child's education, then the movement itself drives this. And so, for example, Arizona was the law that we copied, and Arizona was 2 years, 3 years ahead of us in implementing the educational savings accounts. And when Arizona passed their law, private schools were down on their luck. Homeschoolers were just struggling like crazy to make ends meet. And it took about 3 years for Arizona to really hit their stride. And what's happening in Arizona is there's about 100,000 students that are in their ESA program. Their private schools are full. There are new schools, as Grant mentioned. What it's doing is it's expanding the number of private schools, but it's expanding the variety of private schools. And so the free market really is working with school choice. That's a point that we don't talk about enough, but it's certainly, very much home to the group that's at this table today. But that's what it does, is it creates new ideas. We have a homeschool or a micro school that has started, and there's 5 of them in Utah, and it's called the AIM Academy, and their whole purpose, their whole philosophy is to teach students through the Socratic method. And if you look at what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, you'll say, well, where is the reading? Where is the writing? Where's the structure? And it doesn't look anything like a traditional school, but the results that they get are unbelievable. And they have these end of semester presentations where people, parents mostly, but others, are invited to hear the presentations of what students have put together as projects through the Socratic method. And the level of excellence that is produced out of that school is second to none. And you don't worry about reading, you don't worry about writing, you don't worry about all the typical things that happen in typical schools, because all of that gets created as a result of the process. And those parents and those students are on fire. They are so excited. And what's limiting them is there just isn't enough money, right? So it's like we passed a law that's universal in the state of Utah, but we did not fully fund it. And so we have this problem of people really, really wanting this opportunity, and then us being in a position where we have to means test it, and then we have to go to a lottery in order to be able to figure out how to allocate the scholarships. And so we're not there yet as a movement in terms of the basic principle. The law itself is universal. The law itself says This is a basic founding principle that we believe in Utah, with parents being the primary educators, but you have to follow that up with the funding in order for it to really be implemented. But in the states like Florida and Arizona that have done that, these programs are exploding in popularity and growth because this is what people want. The movement is here. School choice is not going away, and it's a return to these fundamental values. What Brigham Young knew 200 years ago is what we still know today. And the sooner we get back to these four fundamental values, in our country, and I don't think Utah strayed from those four fundamental values. They're being challenged radically, but as long as we hold on to that foundation, Utah will thrive and will be successful. And the country itself, I think, is moving toward these four foundational elements that will restore the great nation that that the United States is.
Well, I appreciate that. It's always a concern that, as you say, if it isn't available for all or on a larger basis because of funding or whatever, or people don't understand that there is that choice and the impact that it's having and the multitude of choices, oftentimes, just like in the political realm, people get fat, happy, and dumb. It's working for me. And we forget that we have to continue fight to achieve continued success in that area, because the other side will come back in. The unions and others will come back in and portray us as an elite, not for the middle class anymore, and only for a certain amount. And I think what you're doing here and what you're speaking of Arizona is something that has to be done for the entire country, to recognize we have it, we have the opportunities, it's growing, but we can't get satisfied with it. Have to keep it in people's minds.
Exactly. The losing arguments in school choice are that it'll be cheaper if you just let this thing happen. You'll save money. Whether or not that's true or not, it's a losing argument, and so we don't make that argument. The other argument that loses is, well, public schools just can't possibly do it, so we have to send it all to the private schools. Okay, that's a losing argument, and we don't make that argument. In fact, what Grant said right at the very beginning, we believe in that. We believe in public education, and we believe that it has to be supported. We believe it has to be funded, and there are many, many good examples of successful public school teachers, public schools, public districts. We don't ever want to disparage that. But the third argument, the winning argument, the one that is hard for anyone to oppose, even though they'll try, is that parents are the primary educators of their children. This is the value that school choice is promoting. It's not that the schools are going to be better. It's not that it's going to be cheaper. It's that it is the right of every parent to educate their child according to what they believe in and the values they hold. And we just stick to that argument, and it has won for us here. Even though the critics step in and they try to disparage that and they try to say the other two arguments, we just don't even respond. But always the third argument wins.
Yes, Congressman, if I could just mention that is the real benefit of this bill, is that it impacts everyone. It gives us all more discretionary income so that we can enjoy the services, whether it's a private school, whether it's going out and enjoying your favorite restaurant often, whatever that might be. This provides discretionary income for us all to enjoy using the services and the things that are available in our communities and in our nation. And to me, that is the best part of this bill.
I just want to say one thing to Gailey before I ask Vic's last question, and we're going to talk a little bit about LERs, and then we're going to, I think, kind of wrap this up. First of all, I truly appreciate the tenacity that you put through to make sure we can get that done with getting the word out. I think at the end of the day, we have great programs across our country. What ECCA does says, you know what, we can stack on top of that. We have things here in Utah. How about we add more to that that doesn't come out of our budget, state budget, didn't come out of district. It's investments from people like ourselves who love our kids, want to invest in our kids. Corporations will eventually want to get that done where they can invest in their industries. you put that in there, every child, and I like the point that Tim made earlier. You can have some states right now that don't want to do it because it's choice is not something they want for their population. But we start seeing success around them. Either they buy in or they go do something else, and that's going to just be very excited about that. So I just want to say this: just know that what we have in Utah is a great start. We're going to start adding more to that, so parents are able to have more choices as we go through it. So Vic, your last question here, I'm going to have to ask you. And I first of all, I really appreciated what you guys have done and the way you're approaching it. The question I have is, what kind of employees in Utah will benefit most with students upskilling through workforce Pell? Because you're dealing with a different population than that comes out of high school normally. So just kind of explain that a little bit.
Yeah, great question. Appreciate the question. First, Utah is experiencing tremendous growth, especially from the private sector. We continue to see businesses relocate to Utah, expand to Utah, and want to make this their home for their business. The first three things they ask about, the three W's, right? Water, wattage, and workforce. Do I have water to do business here? Is there enough energy? And what is my access to workforce? And so as we're working with these companies and looking at who's coming and how do we build a workforce, it's on a continuum. And so again, I mentioned earlier, at all levels of education, there's different credentials, certifications, apprenticeships, all levels of degrees, and postgraduate credentials as well. So short-term Pell is going to have a huge impact, positive impact, I think, for the state of Utah. We've already been looking at our tech college system. We've identified over 30 programs that could go or benefit from that short-term Pell. We think that is very exciting because we continue to reach out to employers and ask, are we doing any good in higher education? Are we meeting your needs? Last year, we completed a study. It was a statewide study. We partnered with the Cicero Group. We had over 600 employers in the state of Utah involved. Every county was represented, every industry was represented. And we just asked them that point blank, are we preparing your workforce the way that you want them prepared at all different levels? And we got some black eyes, we got some comments, but that's a good thing. And, Commissioner Landward is doing some very bold, some very innovative things around higher education. But what we see this bill doing just around the whole bill is increasing opportunities and increasing options, which we think is very important. More money in the pocket creates more opportunities. Eliminating some of that barrier with child health care. And in Utah, we have a lot of moms that go and raise families. They want to come back to the workforce. That provides them a great deal of options to not maybe pursue an entire degree, but as President Pulsifer mentioned, other credentials. What are other credentials that makes them workforce ready? Opens up more opportunities. Same thing goes with the My 529 adjustments. Being able to use funding for non-college credit-bearing coursework. Again, micro-credentials, boot camps, an effort to upskill. We think this is huge. But it also means more accountability for higher ed. We also think that's a good thing. Commissioner has been on record numerous times saying we need to be better stewards of taxpayer dollars. We need to make sure that the investors in higher ed, which is our taxpayers, that we treat them as investors. We treat the legislature as investors. We have to meet our legislators' needs. So we're excited about a lot of different things in here. We think with earned accountability and talking about some of the bold things commissioners let out on, House Bill 265, which came out last year, was a higher education reinvestment bill. It first started out as just a 10% cut across higher ed. But instead, Commissioner Landwehr said, well, wait a minute, we have thousands of unmet jobs in Utah. How about we reinvest? And so he led a process with the campus presidents where they reinvested $60 million from programs that may not have been producing high impact jobs, that may have had low enrollments or high cost of deliveries, and reinvested those $60 million into high yield jobs, high yield programs. But I'll also say too, programs with high societal value. So some jobs we know they may not have a high pay, but they're of high worth. We have to have them desperately in our healthcare programs, in behavioral health. And so it gave us some room to really embed a lot of those programs too. So we're thankful for the movement of this bill. And again, we think it's about opportunity and choices, and we're ready to be a partner in that.
Thanks, Nick. That's kind of a segue into the final little piece we're going to talk about. One of the things that our team kind of brought onto early is something called LERs. I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of kind of where this began. About 3 or 4 years ago, we had Nick Saban that visited us. Nick, anybody do not know who Nick Saban is?
Former Michigan State coach.
Of course. There you go.
That's right.
All right. One of the greatest coaches in the history of the game. And he was talking about NIL, but I kind of tied this to our conversation here. He says, we can identify a young man in 7th grade. By the time he gets to 11th grade, we can offer him a scholarship. Now, how does that happen? That's because this young man knows what Alabama can offer them, University of Alabama, whether it be the color, whether it be the culture, whether it be maybe a way to get to the NFL. And he's excited about making that happen. So he says very disciplined. This is his dream. Meanwhile, Alabama's recognized this young man for the talents he has that could benefit them. So he's going to make sure they can continue to get to him the information they need, and incentive he needs, and the program he needs to be in shape and ready to perform when he has to get that done. So by 11th grade, it's a win-win. What if we would take the same look at workforce? Start off 7th, 8th grade, our kids being able to understand what their passions are, parents being able to understand what their kids can make if they move in this direction. So they do it because they're self-disciplined, they're excited about it, and it's a win-win for everyone. To do that, we have to be a little bit more innovative. And what I'm excited about with this LER concept, Learning Employment Record, is to have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is all bought in. They have the stakeholders all ready to get going. They're going to look at having a possible structure in place by next fall. And all we have to do right now is, on our side, is just be willing to come with some innovative legislation to incentivize for industries to be involved with it, so we can buy into it. So we're gonna have a little video we put together. I want to thank my team. We decided, we actually got the information. We were talking to Vic, talking with Scott, kind of putting all these ideas. We finally had an idea last week, less than a week ago. So, okay, guys, we got to hustle. We need to put this together so when Tim shows up, we can show it to him and the rest of the team. So we're going to share with you our concept, our idea of what a LER can do. And just know our goal is to expose my colleagues with it, so we get some legislative together, and more importantly, allow the free market to really dive in and go for it with you guys' help. So I'm going to get out of the way here and let you guys see it. Okay.
The Working Families Tax Cut is one of the most important accomplishments of this Congress, and possibly for generations. It puts money back in the pockets of hardworking Americans and reminds us who we serve, families. But we cannot stop there. We must build on that momentum with a new data paradigm, a partnership of education, industry, and community, designed to ensure that every learner and every worker has the opportunity to succeed. For students and lifelong learners, this changes everything. Coursework, certifications, apprenticeships, and real-world experiences are all captured on one secure digital record. Each skill and competency is verified and portable. No one is reduced to a line on a resume, and every achievement is seen, valued, and ready to open doors. For employers, it means clarity and confidence. Real-time labor market data reveals where talent is growing, what wages are trending, and which skills are in demand. Career pathways come into focus, make it easier to recruit, train, and retain the people who drive our economy. Learning Employment Records, LERs, are the bridge. They connect the learner's proven abilities with the workforce's real needs. Secure, private, and portable, LERs are powered by technology, but guided by trust. Think of it as a transport interstate, an interoperable data highway where information from states, schools, industry, and even federal programs all flow in the same direction. The job market becomes more transparent, unlocking opportunities that were once out of reach. For decades, education and workforce data were fragmented and outdated. That was the old paradigm. The new data paradigm replaces it with a universally trusted public-private system that connects learners, workers, and employers in real time. Opportunity now flows faster, more fairly, and more securely. In Utah, programs like Admit Utah capture the spirit of innovation. Think of an LER like a digital thumb drive that you carry in your pocket, except it is captured safely in the cloud. Instead of photos or files, it stores every class you've taken, every certification you've earned, and every skill you've proven. When you apply for a job, you can instantly share the complete verified record with an employer. No paperwork, no guesswork, just proof of what you can do, ready to plug directly into opportunity. The new data paradigm, empowering every American to turn learning into earning.
I'll say this, the reason why I'm so excited about this concept, among others, is that we truly have a very innovative legislative body. I cannot speak highly enough about that. Not only do we have the right leadership, but we have a team that's come on the last three terms. More Americans have sent more America First legislators to D.C. So ideas like this we can grab, we can take hold of, and all I ask is if you're innovative, let us know. Let us know how we can innovate on our side to make it work. So I'm excited about this. I'm excited about what we're doing here as a team. I want to just kind of finish up the last thoughts here, and I'm going to have Tim wrap this up for us. I cannot say again enough, when I think about when I left the NFL almost 40 years ago, the idea at that time was to begin a business so I can one day have an impact on kids, the ones that I saw at risk. Had no idea at the time I'd be in Utah one day, working in an environment that kids are really everything for us. And getting a team like this of stakeholders who truly, their mission is how can we make sure the best product we can possibly put out there is our kids and keeping them here possibly. So I'm excited about the fact that Heavenly Father does have a perfect plan for all of us, and we're all part of it. It's not an accident we're sitting here in this state with this leadership, ready to make a real big difference for generations to come. So thank you guys for being here. I want to thank you stakeholders for your friendship. I cannot say enough how much I appreciate you guys. It's been an awesome journey for me. So that being said, I'm going to let Tim wrap us up here.
Burgess, thank you so much. And I concur. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for the roundtable that never turns out to be a roundtable. But truth in advertising isn't necessarily accurate, but it worked around this table. Burgess, I appreciate your passion for this in the workforce and education space, and just this concept and the principles that it espouses of how we can really move forward. We finally got a place where parents don't feel like they are, well, maybe not totally yet, but many, many parents don't feel like they have failed if Johnny, Susie, Nancy, or Billy don't go to a major university or a four-year institution. But they now see that the future for their kids based upon the kids' values and goals, dreams and aspirations, their abilities, plugged in what works for them. Short-term, long-term. The whole concept of lifelong education and lifelong worth. Burgess and I don't even have that word. Starts RETIR or something like that. We don't have that in our concept. We may not always be in this place. And I think that's growing. People want to be fruitful their entire lives. Let me throw out one thing in conclusion here, and it may sound comical or unrealistic, but we passed the SCORE Act, which deals with NIL, transfer portals, employee athletes, and all of the rest that we tried to get a handle on, which in many cases changes college education forever, but it is changed. So how can we control it to some degree? But I'm often thought of if we had NIL for teachers, those master teachers that would get NIL contracts to promote various things because kids love these teachers, they're impacting them. Or what about business people? NIL for certain business people. We'd see on TV ads. We'd see in the social media promoting something more than just athletics. You know, I may be a little jealous of a guy who has a Super Bowl ring and wouldn't have gotten one of those or NIL for my wrestling expertise, but nonetheless, if we promoted some other things then in the real world and said, this is a master teacher who's changed lives, and so he or she is selling some academic material or selling something that makes a difference of relevance in the world, or that business leader or that auto technician that has just expanded their abilities, and we put that out, all of a sudden people start to say, wow, in America there are opportunities, and it's not just at one point. I'm not taking away from athletics at all. That kept me in school. But I thank God for the teachers, including my mom and dad and aunts, that were willing to assist, add, and continue to educate me with a passion for education beyond just grades. So, Burgess, thank you for this opportunity for a sharing a forum here to highlight some great things that are going on in Utah, but are impacting our country and our world, because America is made for the world. And without America continued to be that leader, not only that shining city on a hill, but that leader for innovation, ideas, compassion, competition, and success, other parts of the world won't succeed as well. So thank you. Good to be with you.
And thank everyone for taking the time to come out. This is such an important topic. We have a remarkable team of stakeholders. Cannot wait to continue this process, guys. We're only 9 months in. Just wait. We're gonna have some good things happening. So keep it up, and thank you so much again.